is 5, and she's fully unvaccinated. Now, this is a sample size of 1, but even that, the differential between 3 and 4 doses of a vaccine and completely unvaxxed, that delta in immune health is quite stark. Now, Dr. Hooker mentioned this is a sample size of 1, but even then, it's just noteworthy to mention. Today, we have heard from experts and advocates about the sheer scope of vaccine injury. But perhaps the most important voices in that discussion are from the clinicians who treat our children every day. Pediatricians occupy a very unique role in medicine. They are part of our child's development, especially in the early stages of life. They're often the most trusted by parents, and they're also often the first ones that families and parents call when something doesn't feel right. So in our next panel, we have brought in 3 clinicians who have spent decades working with children. They've seen thousands of children and have a deep understanding of the neurological conditions, their immune health, and also how environmental factors can affect the health of a child. And what we hope to hear in this next panel is directly their first-hand experience of what they've observed in their clinical practice. So with that, I'm going to turn this over to our panel to have them introduce themselves.
Hi, everyone. If you would have asked me about 10 years ago if I'd be sitting here, I would have thought you were crazy. And if you would have said to me even 2 or 3 years ago that we'd be talking about vaccines without saying safe and effective in the same sentence, I would have really thought you were crazy. But here we are, and we're talking about vaccines, and we're talking about something really important, vaccine safety and vaccine injury, and it deserves to be a part of that conversation. My name's Joel Warsh. I'm a pediatrician in Los Angeles, California. And the way that I got here, I did great medical training. I got a master's in epidemiology, was very normally Western trained, didn't think about vaccines very much, but luckily met my now wife during my time in residency. She's very holistic minded, opened up my eyes to a different world. Started doing some training in integrative medicine, fell in love with it. The only thing I ever heard in medicine was it's all woo-woo, and started learning about diet and exercise, and of course that's not woo-woo at all. So I fell in love with it, started practicing in that way, and very quickly when you're in practice in integrative medicine, you realize that parents have a lot of questions about vaccines, and I realized very quickly that I knew basically nothing about vaccines and didn't have the answers to any of those questions. So started learning about it, and so there was a parent who went to the pediatrician's office, beautiful, healthy 2-month-old baby. The baby got all their regular vaccines, and within an hour or 2 had a very serious reaction, fevers, was screaming, super high heart rate, was rushed to the hospital. When they were in the hospital, they got medication to bring that heart rate down. Luckily, that child got better and then went home. They went back to their pediatrician at the 4-month visit, were convinced that it was all just a coincidence, so they decided to do their 4-month-old vaccines. Same exact thing happened. And super high heart rate, was rushed to the hospital, had to get medications, was in the hospital for several days, went home. Went back to their pediatrician at the 6-month visit, and when they were having discussions about vaccines, that mom decided she didn't want to do them anymore because she thought maybe the vaccines could have played a role in those reactions. And she called me crying, and she was wondering whether she had done the right thing. And she had vaccinated her other 2 kids that were older fully on the schedule, but this child had severe reactions, and she thought she was crazy. And I told her she was not crazy, she's a hero for not getting that kid those vaccines. That's insane. We've gone way too far. Right? We've gone way too far in modern medicine, and it's not about just protecting against diseases. It's also about injuries. Any medical product can have an injury, and you can want 2 things. You can want kids to be safe, but you can also want safe products, and those 2 things are not exclusive. And I'm glad we're here talking about vaccine injury today because it's not been talked about nearly enough. So that's why I'm here.
Well, like Joel, I got a classic medical education at the University of Massachusetts and the University of Virginia and was chief resident there, and ended up spending 5 years in private practice and then 11 years as director of pediatric education in a residency program. One day I went in to see a 15-month-old beautiful African-American boy who was at the time due for his MMR vaccine. And this is long before I knew anything about Andy Wakefield or the controversy. It was in 1999, although Andy's paper had been published the year previously, raising the issue. Within 24 hours, this beautiful, developmentally normal child regressed in front of my eyes, developed chronic watery yellow diarrhea, lost his milestones, and I racked my brain to think of what it could have been, but the only thing I could think of that was different was the vaccine that I had given. So I called the parents in and told them that I thought it was a vaccine reaction and how terrible I felt. You know, they were the most wonderful family. They stuck with me for the next 26 years because they figured that I had admitted my mistake and nobody, you know, knew any better.
Hi, my name is Larry Palevsky. I started medical school in 1983 and did a regular pediatric residency in New York and then a fellowship in New York. And after 8 years of medical school and training, I became an ER physician in the Bronx, New York, and covered a private practice on weekends to see if I liked private practice. And then I moved to another hospital in New York, and I was running a pediatric acute care unit, and I worked in a neonatal ICU, and I worked in the inpatient ward, and I taught medical students and residents. And I shifted from the pediatrician who told parents what to do or told parents what not to do to a pediatrician who was obligated to offer information and true informed consent, where I would be educating the parents with as much information as I knew and empower them to make the decision that was theirs to make, knowing full well that I was offering them both sides of the coin and that they were not hearing the other side of the coin from anybody else. And so I not only stopped offering shots in my practice, but I also stopped having hospital privileges. I stopped using electronic medical records, and I no longer took insurance.